The war didn't start with a cannon blast or a declaration signed in blood. It started on a Tuesday with a neon orange envelope taped to my front door and Brenda, the president of the Oak Creek Meadows Homeowners Association, standing on my lawn with a tape measure. I stood on my porch, coffee in one hand, a sense of impending doom in the other. The morning sun was glinting off Brenda's rhinestone-encrusted reading glasses. She was crouching near the petunias, extending the yellow metal tape with the precision of a bomb squad technician. "Morning, Brenda," I called out, my voice thick with the false cheerfulness required to survive in the suburbs. "Measuring for a new fence, or just checking if the earth has shrunk?" She didn't look up. The metal tape snapped back into its casing with a sound like a gunshot. She stood, dusting off the knees of her beige slacks that were undoubtedly ironed within an inch of their life. She turned to me, clutching a clipboard to her chest like a shield. "Grass height, Michael," she said. She always used my full name. It made me feel like I was in 3rd grade and had just glued my hand to a desk. Section 4, Paragraph B. Fescue blends must be maintained at a uniform height of 2.5 inches. You are currently pushing 2 3/4 in the shaded areas. I took a sip of coffee. "It's called vigor, Brenda. The grass is happy. Why do you want to stifle its joy?" "Joy is not in the bylaws," she snapped. She pointed a manicured finger at the orange envelope on my door. "And neither is that." I looked at the envelope. I knew what it was. We all knew what the orange envelopes were. They were the mark of the beast, the scarlet letter of Oak Creek Meadows. I ripped it off the door. The adhesive was industrial strength, probably designed to take paint with it just to add injury to insult. I tore it open. Citation 114B. Non-compliant aesthetic structure. Fine. $500 per day upon failure to remedy. Remedy. Deadline, 30 days. I blinked. I looked at the paper, then at Brenda, then past her to the backyard. "The shed?" I asked. "The shed," she confirmed, a smug little smile playing on her lips. "Brenda, that shed has been there for 5 years. It was here before you were president. It was here before the Johnsons painted their door that controversial shade of sunset peach. It's a grandfathered structure." "Actually," she said, pulling a laminated booklet from her tote bag. She carried the bylaws with her, like a Bible or a loaded weapon. "We voted on an amendment last Tuesday. Maybe you would have known that if you attended the monthly meetings instead of whatever it is you do on Tuesday nights." "I bowl, Brenda. It's a sport. It requires focus." "Well, while you were bowling, we passed Amendment 14C. All non-permanent aesthetic structures visible from the secondary street access must conform to the primary architectural style of the main dwelling or be removed. Your shed is," she waved her hand vaguely at my backyard. "Rustic. Your house is neo-colonial revival. They clash. It lowers the tone." My grip on the coffee mug tightened. That shed wasn't just rustic. It was built with my own 2 hands, and the shaky, arthritis-riddled hands of my grandfather, Pop Harrison, 3 months before he passed. We had spent 4 weekends out there. He sat in a lawn chair barking orders and holding the level, while I sweated and hammered and learned that you measure twice because wood is expensive. It smelled like cedar and gasoline inside. It held my lawnmower, my tools, and about $1,000 worth of half-finished projects. It was a sanctuary. It was a monument to the only man who ever taught me how to be a man. "It's not a structure, Brenda," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "It's a home for my lawnmower. It has rights. It has termites, Michael. Or it will. You have 30 days. Tear it down, or I start levying fines against your property lien." She tapped her watch. Tick-tock. She turned on her heel and marched away, presumably to measure someone else's hydrangeas. I stood there for a long time. The rage didn't hit me all at once. It simmered. It started in my stomach, warm and uncomfortable, like bad seafood, and slowly worked its way up to my brain. 30 days. I walked into the backyard. The shed stood there, weathered and noble. It was a simple thing. Red siding, white trim, a shingle roof that matched the house perfectly, or so I thought. I ran my hand along the rough wood of the door frame. I remembered Pop-Pop laughing when I hit my thumb with the hammer, telling me that blue words were allowed in carpentry, but not at the dinner table. I wasn't going to tear this down. I would burn the whole neighborhood to the ground before I took a crowbar to Pop-Pop's legacy. But Brenda had the law on her side. The HOA contract was ironclad. I had signed it when I bought the place, young and naive, thinking homeowners association just meant they plowed the snow in the winter. I didn't realize I was signing away my soul to a regime that would make a dictatorship look like a free-spirited jazz collective. I went inside and grabbed a beer. It was 9:00 a.m. Don't judge me. This was war. I sat at my kitchen table and opened the laptop. I pulled up the Oak Creek Meadows HOA Handbook, 2024 edition. Page 1. Preamble. Page 12. Garbage can visibility. Page 30. Holiday decorations. No inflatable Santas before December 1st. I read. I read with the intensity of a law student the night before the bar exam. I read until my eyes watered. I was looking for a crack in the armor, a typo, a contradiction, anything. Hours passed. The beer grew warm. The sun moved across the floor. And then, there it was. Page 42. Section C. Subsection 2. I leaned in, squinting. I reread it. Then I read it out loud to the empty kitchen. Prohibition of outbuildings. No detached structures solely for the purpose of storage. Sheds, barns, lean-tos shall remain on the property if deemed aesthetically non-compliant by the board. Okay, that was the nail in the coffin. But my eyes drifted down. Exceptions. This prohibition does not apply to accessory dwelling units, ADUs, or guest suites, provided they are habitable residences under 400 square feet, possess a fixed foundation, and comply with County Building Code 1409A. The HOA holds no jurisdiction over county-permitted residential expansions. I sat back. A slow, wicked smile spread across my face. The HOA couldn't ban a house. They could ban a shed. If I kept my tools in there, it was a shed. If I put a toilet in there, it was a home. I looked out the window at the shed. It was roughly 10x12, 120 square feet, well under the 400 limit. "Brenda," I whispered to the air, raising my warm beer in a toast to my invisible enemy, "you just made a terrible mistake." I wasn't just going to keep the shed. I was going to make that shed the most legally compliant, bureaucratic nightmare she had ever seen. I was going to weaponize the county code against the neighborhood bylaws. The orange envelope still sat on the table. I picked it up and dropped it into the trash. Game on. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in sick with a severe case of vengeance. My first stop was the county clerk's office. It was a drab, fluorescent-lit purgatory where dreams went to die in triplicate. The woman behind the glass partition, whose name tag read Doris, looked like she had been sitting there since the Carter administration. "Number 47, she droned, not looking up from her crossword puzzle. I stepped up. "Hi, Doris. I need a building permit. She sighed, a long rattling sound. Modification or new construction? New construction. Detached accessory dwelling unit. She finally looked up. Her eyes narrowed. ADU? You got water hookup? I will. Sewer? I'll tie into the main line. Electrical? Up to code. She stared at me for a beat, assessing whether I was an idiot or a lunatic. You know the setback requirements? 5 feet from the property line. I have 6. You need a contractor license number. I'm acting as my own general contractor, I lied smoothly. But I'm hiring out the subwork. She shrugged, losing interest. She stamped a form with a heavy thud clunk that echoed like a gavel sentencing a criminal. Fill this out. Pay the $150 fee. Post the yellow card in the window. Don't annoy your neighbors. Oh, Doris, I said, taking the paper. Annoying the neighbors is the entire point. She didn't smile. She just went back to 4 across. Step 1 was complete. I had the legal shield. Now I needed the sword, or rather, the hammer. I'm handy, sure. I can fix a leaky sink or build a deck if you give me enough time and YouTube tutorials, but turning a wooden box into a legal residence in less than 30 days? That required a professional. A specific kind of professional. The kind who didn't ask too many questions and accepted. Payment in unconventional forms. I drove to Hardware Hank's, the local independent supply store. Not the big orange box store where the employees wear aprons and smile. Hank's was where the real work happened. It smelled like sawdust and despair. I found him in the parking lot, leaning against a beat-up Ford F-150 that was more rust than paint. He was smoking a cigarette that looked like it had been rolled by a blind man. Concrete Carl. I knew Carl from high school. He was the guy who set off fireworks in the cafeteria senior year. He hadn't changed much, except he was wider now, and his beard looked like a bird might be nesting in it. Carl, I said, walking up. He squinted at me through the smoke. Hammer, long time. You look soft. Suburbs treating you well? They're trying to kill me, Carl. I need a favor. He laughed, a hacking sound. I don't bury bodies anymore, Mike. Bad for the back. I don't need a body buried. I need a house built. Well, a tiny house. Inside a shed. I laid out the plan. I told him about Brenda, about the tape measure, about the orange letter. As I spoke, I saw a light flicker in Carl's eyes. It wasn't greed. It was chaos. Carl hated authority. He had a "Don't tread on me" bumper sticker next to a "My other car is a bulldozer" sticker. So, Carl said, flicking his cigarette butt into the bed of his truck. You want to trick the HOA by building a fully functional guest house that looks exactly like a lawnmower shed? Exactly. We gotta run plumbing, trench the yard, electric, insulation, drywall. That's a lot of work, Mike. I have 30 days. I can do it in 20, he said, scratching his beard. But it's gonna cost you. I have savings. I don't want a check. Paper trail is for suckers. He looked at my truck. I want cash for materials. And for labor, I want your giant season tickets for the year. I hesitated. My season tickets? They were on the 50-yard line. They were my pride and joy. I thought about Brenda's face. I thought about her measuring the grass. Deal, I said. But you have to start tomorrow. Tomorrow? Carl grinned, revealing a chipped front tooth. Brother, I've been waiting my whole life for a job like this. I'll bring the jackhammer. You buy the beer. Not that light crap either. I want the heavy stuff, the kind that tastes like bread. Done. We shook hands. His grip was like a vice made of sandpaper. On the drive home, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I was essentially hiring a chaotic, neutral whirlwind to tear up my backyard, all to prove a point to a woman whose hobbies included measuring grass and organizing potlucks. It was the most American thing I had ever done. When I pulled into my driveway, Brenda was there again. She was standing on the sidewalk, talking to the mailman, pointing at my house. I got out of the truck, clutching the yellow building permit in my hand like a weapon. "Afternoon, Brenda," I shouted. She turned, startled. "Michael, I trust you've scheduled the demolition?" "Actually, Brenda," I said, walking past her to the front window. I taped the yellow card to the glass. It faced outward, bold and bright. "County Building Permit, Residential Edition." "I've scheduled a renovation," I said. She squinted at the permit. "Renovation? You can't renovate a shed. It's an illegal structure." "Not anymore," I said, unlocking my front door. "Now, it's a project." "You can't just—" "County law, Brenda!" I called out as I stepped inside. "County law!" I slammed the door. My heart was pounding. I peeked through the blinds. She was standing there, writing furiously on her clipboard. She was angry. Good. I went to the fridge, grabbed a beer, the heavy stuff, just to get in the mindset for Carl, and looked at the kitchen calendar. Day 1 of 30. Tomorrow, the jackhammers would sing the song of my people. The death of the original shed was a solemn affair. It was a Tuesday evening, exactly 1 day before the deadline. The sun was setting, casting long, dramatic shadows across the manicured lawns of Oak Creek Meadows. I stood there with a crowbar in my hand, feeling like an executioner. This wood had history. It had absorbed my cursing, my sweat, and the smell of two-stroke engine oil. But in order for the phoenix to rise, the bird has to burn. Or, in this case, be dismantled board by board and stacked neatly in the back of a rented dumpster. As I pried the first plank loose with a sickening crack, I felt eyes on me. I turned. Brenda was there. Of course she was. She was walking her dog, a nervous little thing that looked like a rat that had been electrocuted and then blow-dried. She stopped on the sidewalk, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph on her face. "I see you've decided to be reasonable, Michael," she called out. Her voice carried over the sound of the cicadas. "It's for the best. It really was an eyesore." I paused, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Just doing my part for property values, Brenda." "Well, I appreciate the cooperation. It shows growth." She smiled, a tight, terrifying expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps now you can focus on your hedges. They're looking a bit wild." "One thing at a time," I said, forcing a smile. I'd spent the next 4 hours tearing it down. I saved the door. Pop had carved his initials on the inside frame. And I saved the window sash. Everything else went into the dumpster. By midnight, my backyard was empty, just a patch of dead grass where the sanctuary used to be. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, vibrating with anticipation. At 5:55 a.m., my alarm went off. At 6 a.m. on the dot, the world ended. Or at least, that's what it must have sounded like to Brenda. Concrete Carl did not believe in stealth. He arrived in a cement mixer that sounded like it was gargling gravel. Behind him were 2 pickup trucks driven by guys who looked like they wrestled bears for fun. They backed into my driveway with the subtle grace of a tank division invading a library. Beep, beep, beep. The reverse alarm on the mixer echoed off the houses. I ran out to the porch, coffee in hand. Carl hopped out of the truck, wearing a neon yellow vest over a t-shirt that said, "OSHA is a suggestion." "Morning, sunshine," he bellowed. "Ready to pour?" "Let's rock and roll," I said. By 6:15, they were framing the foundation. By 6:30, the sound of a jackhammer tearing into the earth filled the air. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. It was the music of progress. At 6:32, Brenda appeared. She wasn't wearing her usual power suit. She was in a floral bathrobe, her hair in curlers, screaming something that was entirely inaudible over the jackhammer. I walked over to the fence line, acting casual. Carl signaled his guy to kill the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. "Illegal! This is illegal! Stop this instant!" Brenda was shrieking, her face a shade of red that clashed horribly with her robe. "Michael, what in God's name are you doing? You tore it down! I saw you tear it down!" "I did," I said calmly. "And now I'm building." "You can't build. You have no approval. The Architectural Review Committee meets on the third Thursday of the month. You can't just—" "Brenda," I interrupted, reaching into my back pocket. I pulled out the yellow card. "The county building permit." "I don't need the committee." I held it up. She squinted at it, confused. "What is that?" "That," I said, savoring the words, "is a permit for a detached accessory dwelling unit. Class 4 residential." What?" "A guest house," I explained. "Fully permitted by the county. Water, sewer, electric. It's not an outbuilding, Brenda. It's a residence. And according to the HOA bylaws, page 42, section C, you have no jurisdiction over county-permitted residential expansions." She froze. Her mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. She looked at the permit. She looked at the hole in the ground. She looked at Carl, who was lighting a cigarette and scratching his belly. You can't put a house there. It's too small." "It's cozy," I corrected. "Tiny living is very trendy right now." "I will stop this," she hissed. "I will call the city. I will call the zoning board." "Call them," I said. "Call the Pope for all I care. My paperwork is bulletproof." I signaled Carl. "Fire it up." Rat-tat-tat-tat. Brenda stormed off, her slippers flapping against the pavement. I watched her go, feeling a level of satisfaction that borders on the erotic. The next 2 weeks were a blur of construction montage magic. Carl and his crew worked with a speed that was frankly terrifying. They didn't take lunch breaks. They just ate sandwiches while holding nail guns. The foundation was poured. The framing went up. It was the exact same dimensions as the old shed, 10x12, but built to code. 2 sects in framing for insulation. Vapor barriers. We ran a trench to the main house for the sewer line. That took a day and ruined my prized petunias, but sacrifices had to be made. By day 10, the siding was up. I insisted on the same rustic red clapboard as the original shed. We even distressed the paint slightly to give it that weathered look. "You know," Carl said one afternoon, wiping grout off his hands, "we could put a skylight in." "No," I said. "It has to look exactly like the shed. From the street, it must be indistinguishable from the thing she hated." "You're a sick man, Hammer," Carl grinned. "I like it." Inside, however, it was a different story. We installed a tankless water heater, a tiny corner shower unit, a kitchenette with a hot plate, and a mini-fridge. I even splurged on a granite countertop, well, a remnant piece Carl found in a dumpster behind a bank foreclosure. "It's finance gray," Carl told me. "Very classy." By day 18, we were putting on the finishing touches. It was a masterpiece of malicious engineering. A fully functional, legally distinct home, disguised as a garden shed. And then, the police arrived. I was installing the smart lock, a 300 piece of technology on a door that looked like it belonged on a chicken coop, when the cruiser rolled up. Blue and red lights flashed silently, bouncing off the siding of the guest suite. I sighed. Brenda had finally escalated from threats to law enforcement. I walked around to the front yard. A police officer was stepping out of the car. He looked exhausted. He was older, with the kind of weary expression that comes from spending 20 years settling disputes over barking dogs and stolen Amazon packages. His name tag read Miller. Brenda was standing at the end of her driveway, arms crossed, looking triumphant. She had clearly been waiting for this moment. "Officer," I said, walking down the driveway. "Can I help you?" "Sir, we received a complaint," Officer Miller said, pulling up his belt. "Reports of illegal construction, operating a commercial business in a residential zone, and, let me check my notes here, creating a visual nuisance." He looked at me. "You building a meth lab back there, son?" "No, sir. Just a guest house." "A guest house?" Miller looked past me at the structure. "That looks like a shed." "It does," I agreed. "But it identifies as a house." Brenda marched over, unable to keep her distance any longer. "It is a shed! He's lying. He tore down the old one and built this one just to spite the association. It violates Amendment 14C. Miller held up a hand to silence her. "Ma'am, let me handle this." "Sir, do you have a permit?" "Post it in the window," I said, "and I have the hard copy right here." I handed him the thick folder of documents. The permit, the blueprints, the inspection sign-off from the county electrical inspector, who was actually Carl's cousin, but that's neither here nor there. Miller flipped through the papers. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the stamps. "This looks in order," he muttered. "It's a forgery," Brenda insisted. "Look at it. It's too small. To be a house." Miller looked at me. "Mind if I take a look inside?" "Be my guest," I said. "Wipe your feet." We walked into the backyard. Brenda trailed behind us like a bad smell. I opened the door. The interior was pristine. The smell of fresh paint and lavender cleaning spray wafted out. I flipped the switch, and the recessed LED lighting illuminated the great room, which was also the bedroom and the kitchen. Miller stepped inside. He looked at the fold-down Murphy bed. He looked at the granite counter. He opened the door to the bathroom, which was about the size of a phone booth, but had a working flush toilet and a subway tiled shower. "Well, I'll be damned," Miller chuckled. "It's nicer than my first apartment." "It's fully insulated, officer," I pointed out. "R13 in the walls, R19 in the ceiling. Meets all Title 24 energy requirements." Miller turned to Brenda, who was standing in the doorway, her mouth agape. She looked like she was trying to process a complex mathematical equation that resulted in her being wrong. "Ma'am," Miller said, "this is a legal dwelling. It's got power, water, and a permit." But it looks like a shed," she sputtered. "That's an aesthetic choice," Miller shrugged. "Not a crime." "He's doing it to mock me." Miller sighed. He looked at me, then at Brenda. I could see the recognition in his eyes. He knew exactly what this was. He knew Brenda. He probably had a Brenda in his own neighborhood. A slow grin spread across his face. "Ma'am, unless you want to report a burglary or a murder, this is a civil matter. The man has a permit. If you don't like the way it looks, take it up with the county." "The county doesn't care about architectural harmony," Brenda shrieked. "Lucky them," Miller muttered. He turned to me. "Nice work on the tile, by the way. Did you use a Schluter system for the waterproofing? Curdy board, I said. Nice. He tipped his cap. Have a good day, sir. Ma'am. He walked back to his cruiser. Brenda stood there, vibrating with rage. She looked at the shed. She looked at me. This isn't over, Michael, she whispered. I will find a violation. You can't rent this out. The zoning laws. Actually, I said, leaning against the doorframe of my legally recognized tiny home. Short-term rentals are permitted in Zone R1 as long as the owner occupies the primary residence. Page 12 of the county zoning handbook. I smiled. Would you like a copy? I have a PDF. She made a sound that was half growl, half sob, and stormed off. I watched her go. I had won the battle. The structure was legal. The cops were on my side. But Brenda was right about one thing. It wasn't over. I looked at the empty, great room. I had spent $15,000 of my savings. I had given away my Giants tickets. I had a beautiful, spite-fueled, tiny house sitting in my backyard. And now, I needed to pay for it. I pulled out my phone and downloaded the Airbnb app. Time to monetize the malice, I said to the empty room. I started typing. Listing title, The Rustic Micro Retreat. Authentic Suburban Experience. Description, escape the hustle of the city and enjoy the watchful eye of a very involved neighborhood. Perfect for people who love rules, or people who love breaking them. I snapped a photo of the front, making sure to include a sliver of Brenda's perfectly manicured fence in the background. Upload. The war had just gone digital. Winning feels fantastic. It releases dopamine, serotonin, and all those other brain chemicals that tell you you're the apex predator of the cul-de-sac. But there is a downside to winning a war of attrition against a homeowners association. It is incredibly expensive. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my bank account on my laptop screen. The number was red. Not, oops, I bought too much takeout, red. It was, I might have to sell a kidney, red. I had drained my savings. I had maxed out my credit card at Hardware Hank's. And most painfully of all, I had handed over my Giants season tickets, seats I had held since the Candlestick Park days, to a man who cleaned his ears with car keys. Worth it, I whispered, though my voice wavered slightly. I looked out the window. The guest suite gleamed in the afternoon sun. It was beautiful. It was legal. It was empty. If I didn't monetize this spite monument immediately, I was going to be the one living in it while the bank foreclosed on my actual house. Brenda would love that. She'd probably buy my house at auction just to bulldoze the shed. Okay, I said, cracking my knuckles. Let's make some money. I opened a new tab and typed in Airbnb.com. I had never hosted before. My understanding of the platform was that people paid exorbitant cleaning fees to sleep in someone else's sheets. But I had a unique selling proposition. The experience. I walked out to the shed with my phone. I needed photos, but not just any photos. I needed photos that screamed rustic chic while carefully cropping out the fact that the view was my neighbor's heat pump. I lay in the grass, Section 4, Paragraph B, compliant grass, to get a low angle. I used portrait mode. I slapped on a filter called Vivid Warm. Click. The shed looked majestic. It looked like a cabin in the woods, if you ignored the reflection of a Toyota Camry in the window. I went inside. I took a photo of the granite countertop. Thank you, foreclosure dumpster. I took a photo of the Murphy bed folded down, with a throw pillow I stole from my living room that said, Live, Laugh, Lumber. Then came the description. This was the art. I couldn't lie, Airbnb frowns on that, but I could frame the truth creatively. Listing title: The Rustic Micro Retreat. Authentic Suburban Rebellion. Description: Are you tired of the city? Do you crave the sweet, suffocating embrace of extreme order? Come stay at the Micro Retreat, a 120-feet architectural marvel born from a petty feud that got out of hand. Enjoy amenities such as a toilet that is technically in the kitchen, European style. Granite countertops sourced from local urban mining. A front row seat to the drama of Oak Creek Meadows. Warning: the neighbors are watchful. The grass is measured daily. If you are looking for a place to rage, this isn't it. If you are looking for a place to silently judge people while drinking artisanal coffee, welcome home. I set the price. I hesitated. $50 a night? No, that's too cheap. Cheap attracts problems. High prices attract discerning guests. $195 per night, plus a $75 cleaning fee. I hovered over the Publish button. This was the point of no return. Once I clicked this, strangers would be coming to my house. Strangers with suitcases and expectations. But then I saw Brenda across the street. She was scrubbing her mailbox with a toothbrush. I clicked Publish. I went to the fridge to get a beer. Before I could even pop the tab, my phone chimed. Ding! New booking request. Guest: Jax and Tinsley. Dates: this weekend, 2 nights. Message: OMG hi, we are obsessed with the anti-establishment vibes of this tiny home. We are content creators looking for a unique backdrop for our Suburban Safari series. Does the space have good natural light? Also, are we allowed to compost? I stared at the screen. Suburban Safari? Content creators? I typed back, light is great. Compost at your own risk. The neighbor watches everything. Ding. Booking confirmed. I looked at the shed. I looked at my bank account. God help us all, I muttered. The invasion began at 2 p.m. on Friday. I heard them before I saw them. A thumping bass line, something that sounded like a robot having a seizure, vibrated the asphalt of the cul-de-sac. Then it appeared. A Jeep Wrangler. But not just a Jeep. It was wrapped in a matte pink vinyl that was so bright it hurt my retinas. It had no doors. It had oversized tires that had clearly never touched dirt. It pulled into my driveway, narrowly missing my mailbox. 2 figures emerged. First was Jax. He was wearing a bucket hat, oversized sunglasses, and a shirt that was unbuttoned to his navel, revealing a chest that had been waxed within an inch of its life. He was holding a gimbal with a camera attached to it, filming himself walking up my driveway. "What is up, fam? We are here in the burbs," he yelled at the camera. "It is literally so quiet. It's giving horror movie chic." Then came Tinsley. She was dressed in what I can only describe as farm cosplay. Denim overalls with one strap down, a straw hat, and boots that cost more than my truck. She was holding a golden retriever puppy that looked terrified. I walked out to meet them. "Jax? Tinsley?" Jax spun the camera toward me. "This is our host, Mike. Mike, say hi to the T-Squad." I waved awkwardly. "Please don't film my address number." Totally. Privacy is key," Jax said, not stopping filming. "Bro, this neighborhood is insane. The lawns are like AI-generated. It's so dystopic. I love... Wait until you meet the president," I muttered. "The president lives here?" Tinsley asked, eyes wide. "The president of the HOA, Brenda. She's a character." I led them to the backyard. When they saw the shed, the guest suite, they gasped. "Oh, my God," Tinsley whispered. "It's so… texture." "The wood," Jack said, running a hand along the siding. "Is this reclaimed?" "It's Home Depot," I said. "But I bought it with hate in my heart, so it has energy." "I can feel that," Tinsley nodded solemnly. "That's powerful." They spent the next 20 minutes exploring the 120 square feet. They opened the Murphy bed 3 times for a boomerang video. They took photos of the tiny toilet. They seemed genuinely thrilled by how small and inconvenient everything was. Then, the trouble started. "We need golden hour content," Tinsley announced. "The light in the front yard is hitting the petunias perfectly." They migrated to the front lawn. Jax set up a tripod. Tinsley posed with the puppy, doing a series of movements that looked like she was trying to shake bees out of her clothes. And then, the screen door across the street opened. Brenda stepped out. She was holding a watering can, but she wielded it like a flamethrower. She stopped dead when she saw the pink Jeep. She turned her gaze to my lawn. She marched over. I stayed on the porch, leaning against the railing. This was the show I had paid for. "Excuse me," Brenda barked. Jax didn't stop filming. He just pivoted the camera to Brenda. "And here we have the local wildlife, the indigenous suburban auntie." Brenda froze. "Put that camera away. Who are you people?" "I'm Jax. This is Tinsley. We're influencers." "You're what?" Brenda looked at them like they were speaking Aramaic. "You can't park that circus wagon in the driveway. Commercial vehicles are prohibited under Bylaw 9A. "It's not commercial, babe," Jax said, flashing a dazzling veneered smile. "It's a lifestyle vehicle, and we're staying at Mike's micro-retreat." "Mike's what?" Brenda's head whipped toward me. "My guests, Brenda," I called out cheerfully. "They're renting the dwelling unit. Checked in 15 minutes ago." "You are running a hotel?" she screeched. "In a residential zone?" "Short-term rental," Jax corrected her. "We're participating in the gig economy. Don't be a Karen." The air left the neighborhood. He had said the K word. Brenda went pale. Then she went red. "My name is Brenda, and you are violating the peace. I will call the police." "For what?" Tinsley asked, looking up from her phone. "We're just existing. Your energy is very blocking right now. Are you a Virgo?" "I am the president of the association," Brenda yelled, "and you are trespassing on community standards." "Okay, Boomer," Jax said, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. "We're losing the light. Can you scooch to the left? You're casting a shadow on the vibe." Brenda made a sound like a tea kettle boiling. "Over." She looked at me. I raised my beer in a silent toast. She looked at the pink Jeep. She looked at Jax, who was now doing a TikTok dance on my walkway. She turned and marched back to her house, slamming the door so hard I felt it in my feet. "She's intense," Jax noted. "Great content, though." That night, I sat in my living room. I had expected noise. I had expected a party. But Jax and Tinsley weren't partiers. They were curators. At 9 p.m., the music started. It wasn't loud rock music. It was lo-fi chill hop beats to study, relax to. But they had a portable subwoofer that they had set up on the porch of the shed. Thump, thump, thump. It was a low, rhythmic pulse. It was just below the legal decibel limit for a noise complaint. I checked with a decibel meter app on my phone, but it was relentless. It was the kind of frequency that travels through the earth. I looked out the window. The shed was glowing with purple LED strip lights they had installed. It looked like a tiny rave for garden gnomes. Across the street, I saw Brenda's curtains twitch. I knew she could feel it. The vibrations were probably rattling her collection of porcelain shepherdesses. I imagined her sitting there, phone in hand, unable to call the cops because it wasn't technically loud enough. Just a constant, low-frequency reminder that she had lost. I went to bed at 10:30. The bass lulled me to sleep. It was the best night's rest I had had in years. The next morning, I woke up to a notification on my phone. Airbnb review from Jax. 5 stars. The micro-retreat is a total mood. The host is chill, the aesthetic is grimy chic, and the neighbor provides immersive villain energy that you just can't find in a hotel. Highly recommend for anyone trying to disconnect from reality. Hatcher Shed Life. I checked my bank account. The pending payout was $300. I grinned. "Brenda," I whispered, "you haven't seen anything yet." The peace following the departure of the T-Squad was short-lived. It lasted exactly 48 hours, just enough time for the neighborhood to recover from the sight of Jax doing yoga on my roof. I spent Tuesday morning reading the reviews. My listing, the Rustic Micro Retreat, had a 5.0 rating. The comments were becoming a cult phenomenon. Came for the tiny house, stayed for the psychological warfare. Sarah, San Diego. The neighbor stared at me while I ate a bagel. 1010 immersion. Dave, Austin. But Brenda wasn't idle. She was a shark. If she stopped moving, she would die. Or at least her power suit would wrinkle. I came home from work on Wednesday to find a new sign planted in the grass strip between the sidewalk and the street. It was official, metal, and terrifyingly permanent. No street parking, anytime tow away zone. HOA Ordinance 1 D. I stared at it. Then I looked across the street. Brenda was trimming her roses with shears that looked large enough to decapitate a horse. She didn't look at me, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch upward. She had played a good card. My driveway was narrow. It could fit my truck, but that was it. If I had guests, they had nowhere to park. No parking meant no guests. No guests meant no revenue. No revenue meant I was eating ramen for the next 6 months. I walked into the house, grabbed a beer, and picked up the phone. "Carl, it's Hammer." "Hammer!" Carl shouted. I could hear the sound of a circular saw in the background. "How's the Shed Mahal? You get shut down yet?" "Not yet. But they're choking my supply lines. They cut off parking." "Bastards," Carl said, the saw whining down. "What do you need?" "I need a driveway, Carl. A big one. I need to pave the front yard." There was a silence on the line. "Mikey, even I know you can't just pave a front yard. There are impervious surface ratios, stormwater runoff, and the HOA will nuke you from orbit if you touch the grass." "Not if it's an environmental upgrade," I said, looking at a webpage I had pulled up on my laptop. The State Water Conservation Act of 2023. State law says HOAs cannot prohibit xeriscaping or drought-resistant landscaping modifications, including permeable pavers, in an effort to conserve water. "You want to save the planet?" Carl asked, skeptical. "I want to pave over my lawn so I can park 3 SUVs in front of my house legally," I corrected. "But yes, for the planet." "I can get permeable pavers," Carl mused. "They ain't cheap, but they drain water like a sieve. Technically, it's hardscaping, not paving." "When can you start?" "I'm finishing a patio for a guy who pays in checks. It's boring. I can be there tomorrow." "Bring the crew," I said. "And Carl? Bring the big truck." The next morning, the war resumed. If Brenda hated the shed construction, She absolutely loathed the driveway destruction. Carl arrived with a skid steer loader, a small tank-like vehicle with a bucket on the front. He drove it right up onto my lawn, tearing deep ruts into the Section 4, Paragraph B compliant fescue. Crunch. Brenda was out of her house in seconds. She was wearing a tracksuit today, prepared for athletic levels of yelling. "Michael!" she screamed, running across the street. "What are you doing to the green space?" I was leaning on the mailbox, sipping coffee. "Going green, Brenda. Did you know lawns are the #1 consumer of potable water in the suburbs? It's irresponsible, really. You cannot remove the lawn. The bylaws clearly state that 60% of the frontage must be living vegetation." "State Law 88B, I recited, handing her a printout I had prepared. "Supersedes all local ordinances regarding water conservation. I am installing a permeable ecosystem driveway. It saves water. You should thank me." She slapped the paper out of my hand. "I will not thank you. You are turning this neighborhood into a parking lot." "It's a sustainable parking lot," Carl chimed in. He had killed the engine of the skid steer and hopped down. He was wearing a cut-off shirt that exposed a tattoo of a wrench on his bicep. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a dirty rag and looked Brenda up and down. "You know," Carl said, his voice dropping to a gravelly purr, "you got a lot of fire, lady. I like that. Most people just write letters. You get in the splash zone." Brenda froze. She blinked, confused by the sudden shift from legal argument to sexual harassment. I beg your pardon?" "I'm just saying," Carl grinned, leaning against the machine. "You got lungs, good posture. You yell with your diaphragm. It's impressive." Brenda's face went through a complex journey. Indignation, confusion, and then, horrifyingly, a tiny flicker of flattery. She smoothed her tracksuit. I was captain of the debate team in college." "I can tell," Carl nodded. "You want a cigarette?" "Absolutely not," she snapped, the spell breaking. "Michael, this is an abomination. I am calling the city planner." "Go ahead," I said. "Permit is already filed online." She shrieked and marched back to her house. Carl watched her go. "She's a wildcat, Mike," he said, lighting his cigarette. "I think I'm in love. Just pave the yard, Carl." It took 3 days. 3 days of noise, dust, and Brenda staring out her window with binoculars. But when it was done, it was undeniable. We had removed every blade of grass. In its place was a sleek, sprawling expanse of high-end, honeycomb-shaped pavers filled with decorative gravel. It was modern. It was industrial. And most importantly, it could fit 4 cars. I stood on the porch, admiring the gray expanse. It looked like the surface of the moon, if the moon had been gentrified. "It's beautiful," I whispered. I took a photo. I updated the Airbnb listing. Amenity added: private, eco-friendly off-street parking for multiple vehicles. The no parking sign stood lonely and useless on the curb. I gave it a little pat as I walked to the mailbox. "Checkmate," I said. With the new parking lot, eco driveway, secured, the bookings flooded in. The next reservation was for a Friday to Sunday stay. The profile was sparse. Name: Big Red and Tiny, from Sturgis, SD. Reviews: 5 stars. Very respectful. Left the place spotless. I wasn't worried. Big Red sounded like a nickname for a jovial, large man. Maybe a Santa Claus type. I was wrong. At 4:00 p.m. on Friday, the ground began to shake. It wasn't the bass of an influencer's Jeep this time. It was the guttural, bone-rattling roar of American V-twin engines. 2 motorcycles turned the corner. They were massive, chrome and black leather handlebars that reached the sky. They thundered down the street, setting off car alarms as they passed. They pulled into my new eco driveway. The engines cut, and the silence that followed was heavy. The riders dismounted. The first one, presumably Big Red, was a giant. He had to be 6'7". He wore a leather vest over a flannel shirt, and his beard was braided. He had tattoos on his neck, his hands, and probably his eyelids. The second rider, Tiny, was a woman who looked like she could bench press a Honda Civic. She had a bandana tied around her head and boots that could crush a skull. I swallowed hard. I had invited the Hells Angels to my lawnmower shed. I walked out, trying to look casual. "Welcome, Big Red." The giant turned. He looked at me with eyes hidden behind dark aviators. He didn't smile. He walked toward me, his boots crunching on the gravel. He extended a hand the size of a catcher's mitt. "Mike?" His voice was like gravel in a blender. "That's me." "Nice spread," he grunted. He looked at the shed. "Cute." "Thanks. It has character." "We like character," Tiny said. Her voice was surprisingly soft. "Does it have a kettle? We brought our own herbal tea." Yes. Electric kettle on the counter." "Right on," Big Red said. They unpacked. Their saddlebags were filled not with weapons or contraband, but with meticulously folded clothes, and I swear I saw this, a travel-sized humidifier. But the neighborhood didn't see the humidifier. They saw the leather. They saw the bikes. They saw the tattoos. Within 20 minutes, the neighborhood Facebook group, the Oak Creek Watch, was in meltdown mode. Karen P. "Did anyone else see the gang members at 114 Maple Street?" Susan M. "I heard engines. Are they dealing drugs?" Brenda H. "I am monitoring the situation. Stay inside. I have contacted the authorities." I was sitting on my porch, watching Big Red wax his bike with a microfiber cloth when the cruiser rolled up. Officer Miller again. He didn't even turn on the lights this time. He just pulled up to the curb and sighed as he got out. Brenda materialized instantly. She must have been hiding in the bushes. "Officer! Officer!" she cried, pointing a trembling finger at the driveway. "There they are! The gang! They're intimidating the residents! I feel threatened!" Miller looked at the bikes. He looked at Big Red, who was now holding a tiny cup of tea. Miller walked up the driveway. I stood up to intervene, but Big Red stepped forward. "Afternoon, officer," Big Red rumbled. Miller stopped. He squinted. Then his face broke into a wide smile. "Red? Is that you?" Big Red lowered his sunglasses. "Miller? Holy crap, I haven't seen you since the pension fund barbecue." Miller laughed and slapped the giant on the shoulder. "What are you doing in this neck of the woods? I thought you were station chief down in the 5th District." "Retired last month," Red grinned. "Me and Tiny are doing a cross-country tour, checking off the bucket list." Miller turned to Tiny. "Tiny, still running the charity drive?" "Every Christmas," she smiled. Brenda had stopped screaming. She was standing on the sidewalk, looking back and forth between the police officer and the gang member like she was watching a tennis match in hell. "Officer," she squeaked, You know these people?" Miller turned to her. His expression hardened. "Ma'am, this is Battalion Chief Redford. He served 30 years with the fire department. Saved more lives than you've had hot dinners. And his wife, Tina, runs the burn unit charity at General Hospital. Brenda looked at Big Red. Big Red winked at her. We're just here for the architecture, ma'am, Red said. Love what you've done with the roses. Very aggressive pruning. Brenda made a noise that sounded like a balloon deflating. She turned around and walked back to her house. Her gait was unsteady. She looked defeated. She's a delight, Tiny noted, taking a sip of her chamomile. She's the HOA president, I explained. Ah, Red nodded knowingly. Say no more. We deal with arsonists all the time. Same psychological profile. Miller chuckled. All right, folks, keep the noise down after 10. And Mike? Yeah? Stop calling me every time Brenda gets bored. I have actual work to do. I didn't call you. I know, Miller grinned. But you're enjoying it. He got back in his car and drove off. That evening, the sun went down, turning the sky purple. I was sitting on my porch with a beer. Big Red and Tiny were sitting on the little patio of the shed. Hey, Mike, Red called out. You want a cold one? I walked over. They had a cooler full of craft stout. I sat down on one of the folding chairs. We sat there for a while, just watching the fireflies and the occasional twitch of Brenda's curtains. You know, Red said, looking at the shed. This is a nice setup. Quiet, clean, and you got a front row seat to the circus. That's the idea, I said. Why do you do it? Tiny asked. Seems like a lot of work just to tick off a neighbor. I thought about it. I thought about the money, the stress, the cement dust in my lungs. She measured my grass, I said, with a ruler. Red nodded solemnly. He clinked his bottle against mine. Respect, he rumbled. We drank in silence. The bikers weren't the monsters Brenda thought they were. They were just people who liked loud machines and hated rules. In that moment, sitting on my illegal but legal patio, drinking beer with a retired firefighter who looked like a Viking, I realized something. I wasn't just doing this for revenge anymore. I was building a community, a weird, transient, spite-fueled community of misfits, and I loved it.